On August 2nd, 1985, Delta Airlines Flight 191, while attempting to land at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, crashed short of the runway, killing 136 passengers and crew, plus an additional person on the ground. The plane, a Lockheed TriStar, was en route from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Los Angeles, with a stopover in Dallas-Fort Worth. The flight took off at 2:10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. The weather forecast for Dallas stated a, quote, possibility of widely scattered rain showers and thunderstorms. Another weather alert warned of, quote, an area of isolated thunderstorms over Oklahoma and northern and northeastern Texas. As the aircraft flew past New Orleans, Louisiana, a weather formation near the Gulf Coast strengthened. The flight crew decided to deviate from the intended route and instead flew north towards Dallas. At 5:35 p.m., the flight received clearance from Fort Worth Air Traffic Control to descend to 25,000 feet, 7,600 meters. At 5:43, the flight was instructed to further descend to 10,000 feet. The controller suggested the flight fly a bearing of 250 degrees, but the plane's captain, Edward Connors, decided that would fly the plane too close to a nearby storm cell. Captain Connors, who had been with the airline since 1954, was described by co-workers as a meticulous pilot who strictly adhered to company policies. He had often flown around thunderstorms rather than fly into them. At 5:46, the plane was again instructed to descend, this time to 9,000 feet, 2,700 meters. 5 minutes later, the plane's second officer commented that, quote, it was raining over Fort Worth. At 5:56, flight control cleared the plane to descend to 5,000 feet, remarking that the rain was north of the airport and that the airport will be using the Instrument Landing System. The Instrument Landing System, or ILS, is a precision radio navigation system providing short-range guidance to aircraft to allow them to approach a runway at night or in bad weather. It allows an aircraft to approach until it is 200 feet over the ground and within a half mile of the runway. By this point, the pilots should be able to see the runway. If they do not by this point, they are instructed to perform a missed approach and try again or divert elsewhere. Just 3 miles ahead, a Learjet 25 was on the same approach as Flight 191. While on final approach, the Learjet flew through the storm north of the airport and encountered what was later described as, quote, light to moderate turbulence. It encountered heavy rain and lost all forward visibility, but was able to land safely. When later asked why he did not report the weather conditions to the tower, the Learjet's captain testified that he had nothing to report because, quote, the only thing that we encountered was the heavy rain. The tower controller handling landings on runway 17 left saw lightning from the storm cell after the Learjet landed, but before he saw Flight 191 emerge from the storm. At 6:04 p.m., now seconds from landing, one of the flight crew commented, lightning coming out of that one, right ahead of us. 1 minute later, the jet was at 1,000 feet, 3,000 meters, with the captain advising his co-pilot to watch his airspeed. The cockpit voice recorder recorded the sound of rain hitting the cockpit. The captain warned his co-pilot that, quote, you're gonna lose it all of a sudden. There it is. The CVR then recorded the sounds of the engine slowing, and from then on, the plane began a descent from which it did not recover. Now descending at a rate of 10 feet per second, or 6 miles an hour, the aircraft's landing gear made contact with the field, some 6,300 feet north of the runway. Remaining structurally intact, the aircraft rolled at high speed along the farmland. The aircraft struck a streetlight, and its nose gear touched down on the westbound lane of Highway 114, skidding across the road at least 200 miles an hour. The aircraft's left engine hit a Toyota Celica, killing the driver instantly. As it continued its slide down the highway, the plane began to break apart. Surviving passengers reported that fire began entering the cabin through the left wall while the plane was still moving. A survivor stated that he watched passengers attempt to escape the fire by unbuckling their seatbelt and trying to flee, but were sucked out of the plane, while others who stayed caught on fire due to leaking jet fuel. He only survived due to being doused by rain from openings in the plane. The plane finally came to a crashing halt when it hit 2 water tanks on the edge of the airport property. As the left wing and nose struck the water tank, the fuselage rotated and was engulfed in a fireball. Due to the water tank impact and resulting fire, only 8 people from the cockpit and passenger section, forward of seat row 34, survived. The remainder of the survivors were located in the rear cabin and tail section, which had broken off and ended up in a nearby field. 2 of the passengers that initially survived the crash died more than 30 days later. In total, 137 people died, including all 3 members of the flight crew and the driver of the car. After a long investigation, the NTSB deemed the cause of the crash to be attributable to pilot error for their decision to fly through a thunderstorm, combined with extreme weather phenomena associated with microburst-induced wind shear. In a microburst, wind travels directly downward, hits the surface, then travels outward, in the opposite manner of a tornado. The NTSB also determined that a lack of specific training, policies, and procedures for avoiding and escaping low-altitude wind shear was a contributing factor. To improve detection of such phenomena, the NTSB mandated that all commercial airliners be fitted with an airborne wind shear detection and alert system. The crash of Delta Flight 191 resulted in the longest aviation trial in American history, lasting from 1988 to 1989. The court found that both government personnel and the Delta flight crew were negligent, but the Delta was ultimately responsible as the pilot's negligence was the ultimate cause of the disaster. In 2010, 25 years after the accident, a memorial was installed at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport.